Good morning, good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in today. Thank you so much for joining my teammate Connie and I for today's Ajera User Group. We'll be talking about from the Project Command Center budgeting methods. I just want to let you all know when you complete the survey at the end of these user groups, one of the questions is, what would you like us to present on in the future? And this topic comes up a lot. So Connie and I were kind of chatting as we were getting settled in here and saying, boy, it seems like we present on this quite a bit. So I just kind of wanted to give that little precursor that we're listening to you all. I do think this is kind of a different approach at some of what we've presented before, but really looking forward to your comments and thoughts as we go. So if you have not attended one of our user group meetings before, I'm just going to quickly kind of run through the logistics. As we go throughout this user group, please submit your questions and your ideas in the question box. We won't be monitoring the chat box. This is a user group. This is about users sharing information with other users, tips, tricks, ideas, lessons learned. So please, let's keep that question box going. We will answer as many questions as possible during the meeting, but if by some chance we are not able to get to your question during the meeting, we will send a follow-up email. We will leave no question unanswered. After today's meeting, you will automatically receive a survey. Your feedback is invaluable. As I mentioned, that's how we get better at what we do. We take critiques. That's how we get our ideas for upcoming sessions. So please take a moment and fill out that survey. I think it's only 5 or 6 questions. The handout for today's meeting is actually not in the handout section of the GoToWebinar pane. I'll see if I can get that rolled up to a PDF and out there. If not, you will receive it in an email from our marketing team. If you've attended our user groups before, you know there's not really a lot of information in the handout. It's really just meant to be kind of a reminder of the best practices, tips, and tricks that we showed during the meeting. If you're interested in receiving a CPE credit for today's user group, you will have to take the survey and answer all 3 polling questions. When you answer the survey, there will be a box to indicate that you're requesting the CPE credit. And answering those 3 polling questions is important. I'll be reminding you of that requirement as we go through the polling questions. I don't want anyone to be frustrated with us. If you're new to Stand-by-Nest, we've provided a little bit of information here about the company. Stand-by-Nest is a very interesting professional services firm. Started off as a CPA firm over 100 years ago, but for the last 60 years, our focus has been on the architectural and engineering industry. We've got talented professionals across the country that are spending their time studying all of the compliance and technology changes that might be impacting you. We've listed a few services here that we think might be interesting or helpful to you. If you haven't visited our website, I'd really suggest you do so. We also present a lot of informal webinars on things that might be impacting us. For an example, state and local tax, we have an upcoming webinar. The R&D change for capitalizing the qualifying expenses, we've been educating people. So check out those things. We're really devoted to helping bring the latest information to help you manage your business. And just briefly, we're going to take a moment to introduce ourselves. My name is Val Higgins. I'm the Managing Director of Ajera Consulting and Project Management Training here at Stand-by-Nest. I have been working in the A&E space my entire career, specifically working with and on Ajera since 2007. I began using Ajera when I was the controller for an MEP firm here in Arizona, where I'm located. And in 2014, moved into consulting. I have a real passion for helping people align their systems, optimize their workflows, and especially for project management training. Connie and I really lead those efforts here. In addition, I think it is important to note that I am a project manager and have been since 2014, leading teams, leading projects. So when you hear us sharing user tips or best practices, I'd like you to understand that is boots on the ground, hard lesson learned information that we're sharing with you. I'm going to let my teammate Connie introduce herself.
Thanks, Val. My name is Connie Hawkinson. I've been in the industry, A&E industry, for the majority of my career in an operational management role, working with project managers to get the best out of the PM tools. I have helped implement Ajera in the firm that I was with prior to joining Stand-by-Us. My strength is really, like I said, helping PMs get the most out of their tool in terms of financial management, budgets, resource management, project performance. Really looking forward to sharing our ideas with all of you today.
Thank you, Connie. And just to let everyone know, I am right now updating that handout, and it should be available to you now in your GoToWebinar control pane. So you can download if you like. Our marketing team will be sending that out to you. Michael has asked, did I hear correctly that the recording and the handout would be available for use and viewing after this presentation? That is correct, Michael. And for everyone on the call, all of our prior user groups are also available on our website. We have an on-demand site where you can search the topics. You can look at any of our prior user groups as well out there. Our agenda for today is pretty simple. We're going to look at building project templates for optimal use. And this is something that Connie and I help a lot of firms with, helping build project templates that can emulate and or ultimately replace Excel documents that your team might be currently using to build their fees and estimates. We're going to take you through that and take a look at the elements that will create optimal templates. Something that I love showing people, and we find that a lot of people aren't aware of, is if we're using a top-down budgeting method, we can reverse engineer that with a bottom-up method. And that is the ultimate look at a fee that we are thinking of presenting to a client. And I'm hoping that after today, what we show you, you can train your team on and find some real, uplift in the information that Ajera would be offering to your team during that budgeting process. And we're going to talk a little bit about why do we recommend that you budget at a very detailed level. And when I say very detailed level, I mean with resources, meaning employees and consultants and expenses if needed and dates. We've got QA time listed here, but if you're familiar with these user groups, and as I encouraged in the beginning, we would just really love it if you would just pop your questions in as we go. We're both keeping an eye on that questions box, and when there's a natural pausing point, I will be pausing and helping answer those questions. We like to get the polling questions out of the way at the top of the meeting so that the rest of our time together, we can just focus on the data. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and launch our first polling question, which is, are your project managers using Ajera to build their fee estimates? We know a lot of people are still using Excel to do that and maybe haven't transitioned into having their employees do that within Ajera. We'd like to show you some of the benefits of that, but first we'd like to kind of get an idea of how many of you are using the tool already. And you all are coming in pretty quickly. We've got about 80% of you voting. I am going to give this a few more seconds because I want to remind you all, if you're going to request the CPE credit, you will need to answer all 3 polling questions and complete the survey. We still have a few votes coming in, so I'm going to leave this open for a few more seconds. I do appreciate how quick you're all being. And it looks like we've really significantly slowed down here with about 90% of you casting your poll vote. So I'm going to go ahead and close that and share the results with you. So 77% of you do not have your project managers using Ajera to build fee estimates. 15% of you do. Big gold star, very excited to hear that. If any of you have tips for your fellow Ajera users as we go through this demonstration, please feel free to throw those in the questions box. 7% of you don't know, which is fine. So really hoping for that 86% of you, we can show you some true value in using that tool today, because there is a lot of value. So our second polling question is, do you and your team use templates to set up new projects? So as you all know, we have multiple choices on the way we set up projects in Ajera. We could set them up from scratch. We could copy another project, or we could use project templates. And you are coming in very quickly, appreciate that, but I am going to give this a few more seconds to make sure everybody has their opportunity. And we're at about 80%, kind of slowing down here. I'm just going to give this a few more seconds. Oh, we had someone cast a vote and uncast a vote, so we went down. All right, it looks like we've significantly slowed down with 84% of you casting that poll vote. And so I'm going to go ahead now and close that and share the results with you. So 73% of you are using templates to set up new projects, and that is just really awesome news. There are so many benefits to using the template. So I'm really happy to see that 3/4 of you are doing that. And then the other 23% no, 4% I don't know. I'm hoping that after today, those of you who aren't using templates might really kind of take a dive into using that tool for some efficiency and consistency. So our third and final polling question, are your projects budgeted with resources? And when we say resources, we mean, are you setting up your budgets in your Project Command Center with the purple resource rows that would list employees, labor and employees, consultant budgets, expense budgets if you have considerable expense budgets? That's what we mean by this question. And again, you guys are coming in pretty quickly, but I'm going to give this just a little bit here. All right, it looks like we are slowed down right here at about 89% of you casting your poll vote. So I'm going to go ahead and close, 90%. Let me give it another second. We had a little jump. All right, it looks like no more activity at 90% of you. I'm going to go ahead and close that and share the results with you. So 52% of you are budgeting with resources. Amazing. 40% are not, and 8% don't know. So we got about a 50-50 mix here. Again, our goal is to show you the benefits of using these tools with the hopes that it might really give you an uplift in what you're trying to accomplish and in your project reporting and team delivery. So Dion gave us a little comment here. My answer for resource budgeting is sometimes, but mostly no. And that's fair, Dion. That's great. Thank you so much. And I guess we could add a prompt next time that says sometimes to get that kind of answer. Appreciate you giving us that feedback. So just why do Connie and I recommend detailed project budgeting? Because that is something we do every single day in our work path. Every day we're having conversations around using these tools and what is the benefit. And you can see here the graphic on the screen is a very detailed build out of a project budget in the Project Command Center. Some of the reasons that we recommend this is now we have budget to actual information, which is truly invaluable to your project managers, to management, to everyone, and even to the team assigned to assessing the project performance. When we share this information out in widgets, which we can share this out in widgets or the schedule manager, we are now transitioning ownership of successful project delivery from just the PM to the PM and the team, because now we've made the team aware of their parameters of budgets and deadlines on projects where they've been assigned. Also, budgeting with resources and dates provides forecasting information that we're asked about every single day. How many labor hours do we need to fulfill in the next 6 weeks or 6 months? By employee type, do we need to hire? Do we need to find more work? These are the types of questions we're trying to answer. There are out-of-the-box reporting tools for you. If you complete your project budgets to this level, you can get that kind of forecasting information, and we'll be showing you examples of that. Budgeting with resources sets the schedule manager up for easy use. I feel like the schedule manager is a pretty greatly misunderstood tool, and I'm not sure that all Ajera users really understand. If you set up a project with this level of detail that we're looking at, your schedule manager has already been set up for your team just to begin assigning hours. It's a great tool that interacts with the Project Command Center when you're looking for a very basic and simple scheduling resource. And then budgeting with our consultants engages budget, paid when paid tracking, all of those things that are so hard for us to try and keep up manually when we're trying to keep track of a lot of consultant budgets. As you know, that can really become a runaway train. So these are some of the whys behind what we're about to dive into in the software. So I'm going to go ahead now and pop into the software itself. Connie, can you confirm that you can see my Ajera screen now?
Yes, Val, I can see your screen.
And actually, before I move on from that, sorry, I'm not being a very good team player here. Connie, anything you would add to any of these bullet points?
No, I think you really hit it. Just the more detailed approach really engages all the really good project management tools. I just can't stress it enough what you said about Schedule Manager maybe being a misunderstood tool, because if you are using your templates wisely in terms of setup, when you create your projects, that Schedule Manager piece is available to you.
Yeah, I know. And I think a lot of people really don't understand that. So hopefully today we're going to be able to get to that and show you all how it's just kind of a seamless transition from one to the other. So now I am going to pop over into Ajera, and I've already got my project templates pulled up to save us some time. And I know if you've attended previous user groups, you have seen this information before. As I mentioned, this was a requested topic, so we might overlap information you've seen before, but hopefully you'll feel like a refresher doesn't hurt. Now, as we go through this piece of the training or the demonstration in Ajera, if you have tips and tricks, if you have experiences, if you have frustrations or confusion over the way some of these tools work, please throw your ideas, your questions into that question box. We really want you to walk away today with having a light bulb moment or two and some new tips and tricks to utilize into your daily workflows. So you can see here, I have a pretty basic template. I'm guessing some of you have templates that look very much like this. It's pretty common for us to see people breaking out basic services and additional services into phase group. Makes it easier to direct traffic, I would call it, on timesheets. We all might also have some much more complicated templates. If you work in a multidiscipline firm, like I did, you might have your deliverable phases but we might have to have a breakdown by department to allocate revenue and cost to different departments. So here's a little more complicated setup. I feel like when we're demonstrating, it's best to stay with something simple. So that's what we're going to do today. So for really the optimal outputs using all of the tools that are available to you in Ajera, we would recommend really, if you haven't explored the business development tools, they are robust, more robust than most people know. They will provide pipeline tracking, hit rate metrics, sales by month, all kinds of things. If you want to use that tool, we need to have a business development phase with a marketing status in our template. And then, of course, we have our standard deliverable phases in our work breakdown structure. If we're using business development, you can see we've linked these two phases. And then in our example, we like to have an ad service phase just waiting to be used, so that if our project managers run into an out of scope situation and they need to be very nimble in getting started on that work while they're writing the fee agreement or whatever, we want people to have a place to break out their time entry as soon as possible. Because when your team combines that ad service time into whatever, production phase they're working on, that becomes very challenging to split out. So let's just split that time out. That's our recommendation. And then in our model, we prefer to break out reimbursables to their own phase. That is for clarity in reporting and easier management of reimbursables, because we know they can be painful. It's an area where we get pushed back on billing a lot. We do write-offs there. Let's just break them out into their own phase for simplicity. So this is a very simple, basic work breakdown structure template. And I'm not seeing any questions coming in. So I'm gonna move on to the Manage tab here. And I'm gonna show you kind of the progression of build out for what Connie and I would recommend as a detailed and really kind of best practices template setup. So here in the Manage tab, the first thing that I want to show you is you can see here in this Present Distribution column, we have put percentages in the phase columns, and if we're using a parent phase, we got to put 100% there. This allows us to do what is called top-down budgeting. So if you're not familiar with that term, I'm going to quickly show you what it means here. And in our experience, we see this used as a first blush, quick approach at coming up what we think our budget should be based on our experience, market bears, costing, sometimes what our client tells us their price tolerance is. I think I've seen this used more with architects than engineers, but basically if I was to put a fee here at the contract level and push this button, automatically Ajera is going to assign a fee to each of the phases in the work breakdown structure based on the percentage we indicated in the template. So we said SDs gets 15% of our overall fee, which is $150,000. So very quick way. Now we're going to show you this in a real project setup and how this works. By the way, if you haven't input this information and you're going to, notice how I was able to test this right here in my template. If you test this in your template, please go back and zero out the contract and remove that. Now, what I do want to show you here is, had I had my percentages, they have to add to 100%. If you make a mistake, the system will show you, okay? But all of our production phases within a group have to add to 100% of that group, right? So I know I'm going quickly, but I'm going to show you this again in actually setting up a detailed opportunity project. Now we want to take things one step further to give you all of the great information. And notice how we have added labor resources to each of our phases in our template This is something that we would probably be giving coaching on, and I'm going to have Connie speak to this a little bit too, because she really does help a lot of firms design their templates. I have had situations where I sit with a team of principals and PMs, and very quickly they're able to give me the 4 or 5 employee types that would be working on each phase. Other times I've had people say, well, gosh, our teams are fluid. Any employee type could be there. So we want to list them all. We don't want you to do that, because these percentages would have to be assigned to every one of your employee types. And then we would have to, when we use the template, delete unused employee types and adjust these percentages. We have now just worked against efficiency. So I know it's possible for your team to come up with the employee types that we think would most likely be used on these phases, and that's the coaching you want to provide. Now, we want to assign a percentage of the phase fee to each of these employee types. These percentages need to add to 100%, because essentially we want to assign 100% of the SD phase to these employee types. I can't test that here in the template because there's no billing rate in the template, and that we need that for the math, but I'm going to show you that when we get into the real project setup. If we had consultants that we always used on our projects, I would go ahead and resource here. Also, I would add my consultants. I'll just add a few here. I personally like things to be ordered with our labor on top and then consultants, but we could say that we use electrical consultants always. We always use mechanical consultants. Now, what I will caution you against is adding percentages for your consultants, because once we use that, it kind of makes it harder to make changes to your fee. And also because our best practices recommendation is that your team is actually getting fee estimates from the consultants when they're building their fees. We don't want to work on a percentage. We want to get a fee estimate to make sure that we're not going to be under budgeting. So we could build our consultants right into our template if we needed to. Now, some of you may not regularly use consultants, and that won't make sense. We could also add reimbursable resources if we wanted to. So if we knew that we always had mileage and I want my team to be able to easily budget for that, and maybe we always have reproduction, you might have field vehicles, you might have testing, there could be a lot of different things. Typically, we see people doing this when they have pretty significant expense budgets, or when they want people just not to forget. Don't forget to budget for mileage, right? So we're going to put that in there. So you could also have these waiting. The idea is the more information in this template, the easier for your team to grab it and create their budget. The last thing I want to point out here before I let Connie weigh in is that these statuses, and you've probably seen these from us for a long time, are what we would recommend as the perfect status setup for opportunity projects. If we're going to be using business development to track our opportunity projects, honestly, even for new active projects. So preliminary in our world would equal a project that's not approved. We might be tracking it for business development. This phase, and only this phase, has to be marketing to use the business development tools. The reason we have all the rest of our production phases on hold and not work hold is because if we had even one of these phases on work hold and we were tracking opportunity projects, the system would create a draft invoice, which would frustrate all of you. So this setup will allow you to track your preliminary projects. Your team will be able to put time to the marketing phase, the business development phase with the marketing status, but all of the rest of our production phases will be on hold so we can control time entry until such time, as we win that project. So Connie, anything to add, weigh in on?
You really covered the gamut of it, Val, but I would just add a couple of comments, and that is when you spoke in the beginning about building out your templates according to how we would propose the project, maybe in a fee calculator situation. So I like to start there with project managers. How does your proposals consistently look? What project types are we doing? That's how I like to start having that conversation about templates so that we can be the most efficient and then really move forward with doing our cost estimating right inside of Ajera versus in an outside spreadsheet. So when the templates make sense to how we're going to propose the project, I think that's really very important in engaging project managers to do their costing in Ajera. And then also, regarding expenses, I always, even if we're not going to pull out a type, an expense type, I like having that expense resource pulled out, because when we pull it into a project mode, if we accidentally, enter our fee at the blue level, it's going to default to labor unless we manually go in and make that change. So I like having it resourced just for that reminder. We've got to put our fee in at the purple row.
Yeah, I like that too. And we are getting some questions here. So Marilu asked, will that additional services phase be shown on that invoice? My easiest, simplest workaround for that, Marilu, is to make it time and expense. And I recommend that anyway, because if a PM does engage that, but maybe the paperwork doesn't go through to you or whatever, then that time and expense will show up on a draft invoice, which will then get everyone in the loop, and we're going to have to get our paperwork out. But time and expense phases that don't have any activity will not show up on the invoice. You can keep those in a hold or work hold status until you're ready for people to work on them, which will keep them from entering time. Jessica said, I would really like to see adjustments per phase possible, with it being accurately reflected in the budget snapshot on the project dashboard so they can see an accurate budget for each phase that is left. Jessica, there are reports that will show you that. So in particular, the drill down project dashboard from any project link on any project dashboard will take your team to a phase list that shows that information. Sorry, I was typing and talking at the same time. So it is possible without us having to make adjustments. And let's see. I think I missed one here. Lori, instead of setting status to hold, why not just uncheck the available for time entry box? I mean, we could do that, but it's easier to just change the status. And also, we're proponents of letting PMs update their statuses when they're ready for people to work on their phases. So technically, either way would work, but we feel like the status is more visible and just easier. Okay. Bill is clarifying. What I meant is that what Val is doing at this point in the presentation, or is she just showing the advantage of using templates? Right now, I'm just showing how to set up a template. And then we're going to show how to use it in just a minute. And boy, you guys are getting at this, so be patient with me. I'm going as fast as I can. How do resources affect client invoices and billing? So they impact revenue type reporting. And how can you print the budget in a presentable way for a client and or internal? We'll show you some options, Seth. And Tanya has asked, can employees enter time in timesheets if it exceeds the contract amount? Yes, they can, which is why we really recommend updating phase statuses. And I mean, the long and short of it is we know that some phases come in under, some phases come in over. And so we can control time entry by the phase status, but that's really why our PMs need to be watching their reports, because they need to take an action. And so Jessica, you cannot create adjustments per phase. But I think there's different, better ways to view the budget remaining. Okay. Boy, I really appreciate this. You guys are being very active. I agree with you. Mary Lou has said, I suggest the require notes on timesheets can be checked so the PM can easily see out of scope services. And you're right, we should have that box checked. I think also, I don't know if we have mandatory notes turned on in the system. I don't think we do. So I agree with you 100%. And we really should have had that engaged. That is an excellent idea. All right, I think there's only one left for me to verify. Did you say the difference between hold and work hold is that work hold creates the draft invoice only from the template, Lori, only from the template. So if we had our template with work hold here, we would get a draft invoice. So if you want to take a screenshot, or I'm sure you might see this in the screenshot we have in the presentation. This is the perfect phase status setup if we're going to use opportunity projects. All right, Connie, did I catch up with all of the questions?
You did, Val.
All right. Wow, I love this. I love how engaged you all are. Okay, so now we're going to go into the Project Command Center. And we're going to use a template because I really do want to show you this reverse engineering. I don't think everybody is aware of it, and it is such a powerful tool in Ajera. So I'm going to create from my simple template. If you don't know how to create a project from a template, I clicked on new. It brought up let me close that. Brought up a list saying, how do you want to create it? Because I'm an administrator. I want to create from a template. I'm going to pick my simple template. Whenever you use that to create a new project, it automatically is going to call it new project. And I'm not feeling very creative this morning. I'm sorry. I'm just going to call it Wednesday new project. Maybe we're assigning P numbers, maybe we're not. I'm just kind of showing the example in the way that I would be using the tool. And I'm just going to pick some of my really quick basic information. And we have to pick a client to move forward with budgeting. I'm not going to fill out the business development information because that's a different topic. So I do realize I should do that right now. But really our focus for today is on budgeting, and that's what I want to get to. So I'm going to click on the Manage tab. It's going to take a moment for Ajera to catch up because it's creating that whole new project record. And I'm going to filter. All right, I'm not going to filter my view right now. I'm just going to get more of the screen. Here we go. So now you can see what we saw in our template has come into this new project. If I click on resource rows, you see that as well. If I'm using a top-down approach, which in my opinion should only be our first approach, our quick approach, All I have to do is type in my contract number, hit my percentage sign, and lightning quickly, it has provided a fee at each phase level based on this percentage. 15% of 150 is 2250. What we didn't see happening because I had resources turned off, and this is where there's so much power, is if I click show resource rows, the system actually calculated labor hours for us. And if we're using a top-down Excel template, we're probably not getting this level of information. How did it assign hours? We said the principal gets 5% of the SD fee, which is $22.5. That dollar amount's $11.25 divided by the principal standard rate of $215, 5.23 hours. You are going to get messy hours because it's just doing the math. But again, probably a lot more information than we might be getting in a top-down spreadsheet. So this is great information, but is it enough to get the work done, right? So I'm going to save here. And then I'm going to lock my contract. When I lock my contract, I now have the ability to adjust. So now look, my contract is locked down. All of my phases are locked. They're not going to change. So now this is what I call reverse engineering. Now I could really think about the scope of services and the level of effort we think it's going to take to get this work done. And I can start adjusting these hours. Now I'm going to go quickly because we have limited time. Your team, it'd be taking them a few minutes. They'd be really thinking through the scope of services and what is it going to take and how far off is this estimate. But I'm just going to race through this because I want to get all the way through it. Okay, so you might have noticed these numbers changing, but these numbers did not. Now I do need to save again because we're going to look at a report. And there was a question about, is there a way to publish the budget? There's multiple ways. This plan report is really just translating my Manage tab into a report. So we can see now my different employee type categories, the hours, the billing rate, and the resource budget. The purple budget is called the resource budget. This is a really powerful feature in Ajera. My resource budget does not have to align with my contract budget. So I could have gone the other way with the hours. I could have said, we're so dang efficient at this type of work, it's going to take less hours, and my resource contract dollars would be less than my contract. Beautiful thing about that is it's these purple resource hours that are pushed out to your schedule manager or pushed out on widgets for hours assigned to the team, which has been something people have been talking about forever. I might budget all these hours, but I know the team can do it in less. I want to show them what I think they can do it in. That would be possible. But the way I approached this was, hey, my market bears thinking, we've done this 100 times thinking, my client told me I'll give you the job if you do it for 150,000. That's this thinking. But when I really think through the scope and the effort, this is how much it's going to cost us at billable rates. And if you happen to work in a firm where maybe principals or marketing develop fees and those fees are passed on to the project manager, this plan report is a great tool for the PM to sit down with whomever developed the fee and walk through this, because that's their opportunity to say, I don't think I can deliver within what you budgeted, or to get a further deeper understanding from the person who budgeted, saying, okay, but you're overcomplicating the scope, or you're overcomplicating something, and then that would be our opportunity to edit these hours. Or it could be, if I'm the person developing the fee, I'm going to go, well, geez, I need to make that budget like $165,000, what I need to do. But we have the ability to see this side by side. We're no longer guessing. about where we're going to land. Connie, anything to add here on assessing the project plan?
The project plan is my most favorite part of this whole process for this very reason of doing that comparison between contract and what the effort is going to take. And I think that is such a critical part of, bringing a team together, or, whoever developed the fee has that opportunity to let other team members vet the fee to make sure that we understand what that effort is going to be. And especially for those firms who are using Schedule Manager, this is really critical. We want the effort to be in Schedule Manager, not necessarily the actual budget. So I think this component is, again, like I said, it's my favorite part of all this.
Yeah, me too. So I'm answering a few questions out here, and I'm hoping I've interpreted things correctly. So Matthew asked, do you ever recommend checking the setting to budget at the resource rather than the labor category level, employee specific? I think what you're asking, Matthew, is do you ever recommend skipping this and putting in names? We actually recommend avoiding that if we can, only because in most firms, people have to be pretty fluid. And we then have to create rate tables by employee name, which we want to avoid if we can because they're much harder to maintain. However, all of that said, Connie and I have worked with firms where they have small defined teams, or they've budgeted rates with a client by specific employees. And then in that case, yes, it would make sense. But it would be a bigger discussion, because as much as we can stick to creating rates by these categories, the easier, cleaner for you all and easier for us to do an annual review and make sure that we are getting our profit targets, because once a year, we're probably giving people increases. And then Dion said, could we use the resource hours to be X% less than the contract amount? And that would be communicated out using the Schedule Manager. We can, Dion, but we would have to do it by editing the hours. So I don't have two percentages here, one for the contract and one for resources. But if I had adjusted these hours the other way, it would have showed that our resource contract was less than our billing contract. And it's these hours that go to Schedule Manager and widgets. All right. So that's a top down with a bottom up. And now I want to show you how the same template could be used for bottom up, because I think that's a big point of confusion, because your software came to you with three templates: a bottom up, a top down, and a quick project. And that leads us to the assumption that I have to segregate my bottom up and my top down, and you do not. And we don't want you to have to design a bazillion templates. So this template I can use for bottom up just as easily as I used it for top down. I'm just going to ignore the top down percentages. And this becomes very simple. I'm going to start putting in my hours. And again, I know I'm talking and typing, and so your numbers would not be like mine are. Just trying to kind of get through this. Yikes. And that's as much as it is, but for your team, it would take longer because they're actually going to be assessing the level of effort it's going to take for your team members at these levels, right? So, all right. And notice as I plugged in hours, it took my units times my standard billing rate, developed my resource fee. All of my resource fees for each phase added up to the phase. All of my child phases and my basic services added up to that level, which then added up to the project level. One template, two budgeting methods. So very easy to do both in one. And that's something we really wanted you to walk away with. So those are the budgeting methods we have here. Now there is one more budgeting method that we could touch on here really quickly. I have to add something into my view. I always forget where to find this. So another kind of version of top-down budgeting would be percentage of construction cost. And I'm guessing some of you do that. You take the overall project construction cost and you put in your percentage of that, and it will then come up with your overall contract. From there, you just use the top-down feature again. So that's one more method here of using the top-down approach. All right, let me save this and kind of look through questions here. So Matthew is asking, how do we add consultant resources and not mess up the contract and labor amounts? Great question. I'm going to show you that for a top-down and a bottom-up. And let's do that right now. So let's come here again and erase. Now I could do this in my template, which is what I kind of started to show you. So let's say we always use these two consultant types. So they're always going to be in my template. What I had recommended was not necessarily using a percentage here, right? So I could go ahead with the same approach I took, and I can let the system do the top-down piece of my labor budget. And then here, now I may not know who my actual vendors are if I'm using business development, so those might stay blank. Big difference in budgeting consultants. We always want to budget consultants by cost and let the system assign the contract value. There's a markup on my rate table, you can tell here, right? Because my cost is 15, but I'm going to charge that much. The system automatically knows if we use this correct resource type, that on this phase, 22.5 is my labor budget and my consultant budget is 40.25, which is these two lines. So again, I could have had that in my template, so it was easier for my team to fill out here. The reason I say that percentages can be a little bit messy is because notice how once I've introduced consultant budgets, I can't just quickly edit this top-down number anymore. There is a workaround. So if I was going to use percentages here, let me do this. Let me make this 60. I'll make this 5. I'll make this 5. And again, thinking all of these things would be in our template, right? So here, what I could do, and you can see it gave 5% and it backed into the cost. Really, our best practices is not to be using percentages for the consultants, because our concern is then our team could potentially, bypass that going to the consultants and getting the fees so that we have an accurate budget in for the consultants, because we know consultants are painful to everybody, right? And I would have had to manually erase these numbers even though I changed the template. So here I could go back to my 150. There we go. All right, let's look at questions. If you don't include a resource in the PCC, it doesn't line up with the actual hours in the employee and the schedule manager. You're absolutely correct, Diana. The schedule manager is looking here for the budgeted hours. So if somebody else fulfills the role of the drafter and their employee type is not the same, the schedule manager will show that person's actual hours, but it won't be comparing it to the drafter. So we may want to make an edit here. Please, please, please always make sure if we're going to be making changes like that, we have our contract locked down so that we can edit things that we need to make other things align with what's really happening, but we don't impact our billing. On a labor resource, I cannot type in the type and resource unless it's a consultant. So 2 things to check, Lori. You want to make sure when you're adding the resource, you click here and pick the right one, because I can only add employee types to labor resources, consultants to consultants, expense to expense. And then also you want to be checking here to make sure these boxes are entered as well. And Connie, if you don't mind, can you just go behind me and type in those answers?
Yep.
I was trying to keep up, but I
Yep.
lost it.
Yep. Nope. That's okay.
Thank you. So Amber has asked, would the cost column still populate correctly, even though the employee names aren't included as a resource on the Manage tab? I noticed they were not populating in your example. Amber, once you added your employees, they would. We don't have our employees here, so they're not. And we don't use average costs on employee types because that's something that tends to not get updated and tends to not be accurate. So that wouldn't be showing here until we actually added people. And Stephanie said, can you waive the markup on a consultant for a single item? Say one item's a pass-through direct cost, so you don't want to add the markup. There's a couple ways to do that, Stephanie. We could add the so we could have a different phase with a different rate table that didn't have a markup for that one consultant. Or what you could do is that's what I would recommend, because I want my cost to be accurate. So like, let's say you didn't want the markup, so you're going to charge $1,500 for them. Because my rate table on this phase has a markup, it's going to back the cost down, which means then when you're entering vendor invoices, you're not going to get an accurate verification. So separate phase with a non-markup rate table would really be what I would recommend for that. Tanya said, does this mean when you're entering a consultant invoice in the vendor invoices and it exceeds the contract amounts, the system will not let you enter it? It's the cost amount here that's going to be verifying against, Tanya, because this is your cost, which may or may not be the same as the billing. You have options in your company preferences to warn you and let you proceed, or to stop the entry, but our recommendation is that we're really paying close attention to that because the tool's there to make sure we don't overpay those consultants. Brandon has asked, is there a report that could be run to see schedule versus actual hours? There's so many different options of that. So any project dashboard, I took my hours off of here. We can pull, oh great, I don't have a project dashboard that has the hours. So most project dashboards, we could have hours budgeted, hours used, hours remaining. But when I drill down, definitely this will show this too. Hours budgeted, hours worked. We could add an hours remaining column, or we could create a different widget. So lots of ways to reflect that information. Diana, can you do a webinar on using the schedule manager? I'll search our previous webinars for that. I think, Connie, did we just do a class on that?
We did not too long ago, so it should be available on our.
Yeah, so out on our website, we have a class actually. We built that into more than a user group. There's a class, and we gave away a couple widgets with that. And I'll show you where you can find those as well. So wow, we had so much engagement on this. Thank you all. This is what makes this such a great learning opportunity for all of us. But I do want to be respectful of our time, and we're out of it. So I'm going to just get us wrapped up here real quick. Connie, can you see my PowerPoint again?
I can.
All right. So our best practices tips from today: build out those detailed project templates. They're going to give you consistency and efficiency, and you saw how efficient they were. Top down and bottom up can be in the same template. No need for multiple templates. Train your team on these budgeting tools. It's really easy if you let them know we're only replacing a tool with a different tool that's going to give you more information. If you do use top-down budgeting, teach your team that trick that we just showed you how to reverse engineer, and this will be recorded so you can watch it and really digest it. Share the budget and schedule information with the project team to help us get to the finish line on time and on budget. Once the data is in the Project Command Center, we could share it out in so many different ways. So next month's user group is going to be on billing rate development for optimal profits. We are having more and more questions on how to verify our billing rates to make sure that we're covering our cost, our overhead, our profit targets. And we're going to walk you through that. I think it's going to be really, really valuable. Just great webinar for you to watch. Connie and my teammate Shauna will be presenting that on July 12th. And if you do want to look at some of the schedules classes we have, you can click here to see them all. I think we have 22. They're very affordable. You get a recording you can use over and over and over. And generally, we're giving away some kind of dashboard or widgets with those classes too. But it's a deeper dive into these topics. Just want to remind everyone, Project Con is coming up in October. And if you haven't yet registered, please, find information here. There's a link to register. We have until July 14th to qualify for those early bird rates. So we'd really recommend that you get that scheduled. They just opened it up today, and hotel rooms where the conference is will be going quickly. So if you're thinking about going, we'd really recommend you get out there. We thank you so much for being here with us today. We really would love to have more of you presenting with us. We've heard some really great success stories lately. We're going to be having some users co-present with us. If you have figured something out, been able to move the needle on some challenge, please reach out to me. We would love to co-present with you. Please take that survey. Let us know topics you'd like for us to cover in future meetings. We read every single comment on that survey, and please just fill it out. We listen, we pivot. We want these to be really helpful and meaningful for you. If you haven't yet joined our virtual LinkedIn user group community, please do that. We make some posts out there. We're really hoping more people will be asking each other questions. We answer questions. Just a great way to keep in touch with your fellow users. So we ran 2 minutes over. I apologize for that. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your month. Hope to see you in July. Thank you all. Bye-bye.